Imagine a world where the only maps you have are full of blanks and monsters. A world where the bravest people are those who set out on wooden ships, guided only by the stars and a fearless heart, to find the edges of the known world. This is the story of how a few daring souls opened up the vast unknown, leading to the age of exploration that changed the face of the earth. Long before the rest of Europe knew of places like America, a few adventurous people living on the western and northern edges of the continent were already exploring the unknown. Starting in the 6th century, Irish monks began to visit and settle on remote islands like the Orkney, Shetland, and Faroe Islands. These monks were not just looking for new homes. They were seeking solitude and a closer connection to their faith. They built small communities, raised crops, and lived a simple life. But their spirit of adventure didn't stop there. Some of these Irish explorers are believed to have reached even farther, venturing to places like Iceland. When the Vikings arrived in Iceland in the 9th century, they found these Irish settlers already there, living in a land that was supposed to be empty. The Vikings, also known as Norsemen, were the next wave of explorers. They were a fierce and fearless people, known for their warrior spirit and seafaring skills. One of the most famous Norse explorers was Eric the Red. In the late 10th century, Eric the Red led a group of settlers to Greenland, a vast island covered in ice and snow. Despite the harsh conditions, they managed to establish a settlement. Eric's son, Leif Erikson, went even further. Around the year 1000, Leif landed on the coast of North America, which he called Vinland. This was nearly 500 years before Christopher Columbus would set foot on the same continent. These Norse and Celtic explorers were the first Europeans to reach these distant lands, but their discoveries were largely unknown to the rest of Europe. They were seen as outsiders, almost like the Vikings' enemies, and their achievements did not spark a broader European interest in exploration. While the Norse and Celtic explorers were venturing into the unknown, the rest of Europe was more focused on the known world, particularly the Middle East. For centuries, European traders had been traveling to the edges of Asia, driven by the promise of wealth and profit. These traders were mostly from Italian cities like Genoa, Venice, and Pisa. They were not explorers in the same sense as the Norsemen. They were businessmen, looking for the best routes to bring valuable goods back to Europe. The trade routes to Asia were long and dangerous. One route went overland through Central Asia and China, to the shores of the Black Sea. Another route went by sea, around the southern tip of the Arabian Peninsula, up the Red Sea, and then by land to cities like Alexandria and Gaza. The third route went up the Persian Gulf, and then by caravan to the Mediterranean coast. These journeys were fraught with risks. Pirates, storms, and bandits were constant threats, and the goods being transported were incredibly valuable. Spices like pepper, cinnamon, and nutmeg were worth more than gold, and other goods like silk, pearls, and precious stones added to the allure of the trade. The Italian traders were fierce competitors. They used every trick in the book to gain an advantage, from bribing officials to forming alliances with local rulers. The city of Venice, in particular, became a powerhouse of trade. Venetian merchants controlled much of the trade with Egypt and the Middle East, and their wealth helped fuel the Renaissance in Italy. But the good times couldn't last forever. In the 15th century, the balance of power began to shift. Spain and Portugal, two countries on the western edge of Europe, were eager to find new routes to Asia. They were tired of the long and dangerous overland and sea routes controlled by the Italians, and they were determined to find a shorter, more direct path. In 1291, a group of Genoese ships did something no one had done before. They sailed through the Strait of Gibraltar, bypassing the Iberian Peninsula and heading straight for the Atlantic. This was a bold move, and it opened up new possibilities. If the Atlantic could be navigated, there might be a shorter route to Asia. The idea was tantalizing, but it was also incredibly dangerous. The Atlantic was a vast, uncharted ocean, and many believed it was filled with monsters and otherworldly dangers. But the lure of wealth was too great, and brave explorers were willing to take the risk. One of the most famous attempts to find a new route to Asia was made by two Genoese brothers, Ugolino and Guido Vivaldi. In 1291, they set out from Genoa with the goal of reaching India by sailing around the southern tip of Africa. They were never heard from again, and their fate remains a mystery. But their bravery, inspired others to follow in their footsteps. In 1488, a Portuguese explorer named Bartolomeu Dias finally rounded the southern tip of Africa, which he called the Cape of Good Hope. This was a major breakthrough, and it opened up a new route to Asia. Suddenly, the Italian traders were no longer the only ones with access to the riches of the East. The discovery of the Cape of Good Hope marked the beginning of a new era of exploration. Spain and Portugal were now in the lead, and their explorers would go on to discover new lands and establish vast empires. Christopher Columbus, an Italian explorer working for Spain, sailed west across the Atlantic in 1492, believing he would reach Asia. Instead, he landed in the Americas, opening up a whole new world to European exploration and colonization. Other explorers, like Vasco da Gama and Ferdinand Magellan, would follow, each adding to the growing map of the world. The age of exploration had begun, and it would change the world in ways that no one could have predicted. The discovery of new lands, new peoples, and new resources would lead to the rise of global trade, the spread of ideas, and the sharing of cultures. It would also bring conflict, as European powers fought over control of these new territories. But it all started with a few brave souls who dared to set sail into the unknown, driven by the promise of wealth, the spirit of adventure, and the human desire to explore and understand the world around them. So, the next time you look at a map and see all the places that have been explored and charted, remember that it all began with a few daring explorers who were willing to take on the unknown. They faced dangers and challenges that we can hardly imagine, but their bravery and perseverance opened up a new world of possibilities, and that is the true spirit of exploration.